This is Not for the Average with Trent Leishon.
Brian,
Yes.
aka Fungi. Welcome
Good morning,
back
mate.
to episode 2.
Yes. It's been troublesome this morning.
How are you feeling?
I think we've got it. I think after all that, maybe it's the solar flares.
Well, yes, all the cyclones. Something's going on.
Or the cyclone. There is a cyclone
Something's
between us.
going on in this world at the moment.
Indeed.
That's for sure. It is a crazy place we're in. We had such overwhelmingly positive feedback from episode 1.
Well, I read some stats the other day, and in 2004, last year, 8 million new people tried psilocybin in the US for the first time. And that's a phenomenal amount of take up. And so you have to assume that Australia is doing something similar. I mean, the cat is out of the bag. The war on drugs didn't work. This stuff is actually getting through now, and science is coming through as a champion, which is what it's supposed to be. And people are finding out. And more podcasts like this that we do, the more people will find out.
Natural bloody medicine.
It's been there the whole time.
That's what it is. It's been growing
under our
everywhere,
feet.
all at our feet. It's probably in your backyard.
Literally under our feet the entire time.
That's really fascinating, isn't it? But it's a positive thing. That's a really glaring statistic, but it is a positive statistic.
Well, they said also that they expect that to double this year. So what's happening in the US at the moment, of course, is phenomenal. But a couple of years ago, during the Biden administration, a bill was sent to the Senate, the US Senate, called Bill 519. And the bill was to legalize all psychedelics across the board, full stop, the end. And the bill got narrowly defeated twice by the Biden administration by like 1 or 2 votes. But of course, Trump is in power now, and Trump was the original one who proposed the bill. So guess what's going to happen this year in the US is going to have all psychedelics, legalized right across the board. So that's going to put the pressure on, backward countries like Australia, who, have had to be dragged kicking and screaming all the way.
Geez, it's an interesting time. That's for sure.
It's definitely an interesting time to be alive.
And we're waking up. I think it is a form of awakening.
It is.
Is it a spiritual awakening? Perhaps you could call it that. It is a form of people just getting clearer on reality. What's actually truth, and we have access to that information in all sorts of pockets of from podcasts to YouTube to different social media platforms. So I think there's a groundswell. People are accessing their own information, filtering through what's rubbish, what's not real, and what is real to find whatever it is that they need. And I think it is a little bit of buyer beware with some of this stuff. But when you start to pull together multiple data sources, and you start to see the consistent themes coming through, then you know that you're onto something that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, our education systems haven't taught us to find and analyze our own data. We get taught how to stay in the box. We get taught what the answers are that are required. We don't get taught to argue our own answers. When you send in an exam to be marked, your exam should be marked based on the strength of your argument, not on what the professor thinks is right or wrong. Because otherwise, how do we grow? How do we find new things if you're only allowed to give the answer that they want you to give? And this is something that's been used to manipulate societies for a long time. You don't want a whole heap of people out there making up their own minds about stuff. You want them to do as they're told.
Yeah, it must be compliant humans. They must be compliant. Yeah,
exactly.
Post them up on things that sedate them, give them information that keeps them in fear, so they're vibrating from that fear and scarcity. And it's fascinating. It seems to be a common thread throughout history. This concept of being in the matrix, in the simulation. And you think really deeply about that, and you start to look at things, and you can start, the world does appear a little bit unusual, but like I said earlier, like the awakening process is about questioning everything.
Indeed. Yeah.
You're right. We're not taught at school to question things like that.
No.
So again, is it going to be something that our future generations what's that going to look like? Who knows? But
yeah,
we can't bash the teachers because the teachers are just doing their job. But it's really up to parents, isn't it? It's up to parents the parents play a big responsibility in shaping the world views of their children and their values and the alignment of values and their views. The parents, the tribe.
Parents don't have time. Parents are kept busy surviving because, But look, we can do a whole podcast on this.
The tax. Yeah, working, paying tax.
Keep going.
Keeps them very busy. Busy. Yeah.
We can drop straight down the rabbit hole on all of this stuff.
We're not dropping the rabbit hole because it's a deep one.
It is.
And the depth here is, it sort of does feel to someone like myself, I'm tapping into this new knowledge that, wow, like there's a feeling of excitement that you're finally tapping into knowledge that makes a lot of sense. Because a lot of the information that you get, oh my God, there goes the battery. It's been one of those mornings this morning, Brian. Hasn't it? Because I've watched that battery just drain as we were trying to work out what was going on this morning. But all right, let's just keep rolling until we hit the iceberg.
Right up.
Yeah, because there's no other way to do this because the Rode mic plugs into the
to your power outlet.
Hang on a sec. There's another one here, but I'm just wondering if that will work as well. Okay, that's good. Got it.
Well done.
Okay, I'm doubled up here. Solved my own problem.
Look at you.
And I'm off and racing, which is exciting.
Well, that is a very nice segue into what we want to discuss, the ability to solve your own problems.
Well, yes. That leads us to microdosing.
Awesome.
To the uninitiated,
microdosing
sounds very, I don't know, when I first heard that term, microdosing, it was like, whoa, that sounds really like serious stuff, like it's a dose.
Well, people get scared because we're talking about psychedelics. And if you're dosing on psychedelics, people get scared. But what people don't realize is that microdosing is taking a very, very small amount of a psychedelics, usually, depending on the psychedelic, usually somewhere between 5 and 10% of what people would normally take to have the classic psychedelic effects. So, like with mushrooms, for example, that'd be maybe a 0.1 or up to 0.3 of a gram. It's a very, very small amount. And, eventually you've got to find your own sweet spot in this. But the sweet spot is where you don't have any of the classic psychedelic effects. So there's no visual distortions. There's no weird stuff going on. So you take this stuff and you just go about your everyday life. And no one knows you're taking it. No one can tell you're taking it. You can't even tell you're taking it until you really check in with yourself, So a lot of the fear comes from that. People think, oh my God, it's the same as, having a couple of rums before I go to work. Well, it's extremely different to that, So all of this stuff is what we call, we're looking here for the sub-hallucinogenic effects. And there are a whole raft of those effects.
So finding your dosage.
Yeah, you've got to find a sweet spot. So the general rule is you start off low. You start off on 0.1 and you try that out for a little bit. Then you go to 0.2. Now, each individual will have a different sweet spot. And it's got nothing to do with whether you're male or female, or whether you're a big person or a small person, or anything like that. It's got to do with where you're at mentally, and that's it. So everybody has a different sweet spot.
But it's like some people say, well, I have a high tolerance.
Yep.
To this, I have a high tolerance to that. I've done a lot of different substances over the journey, and I'll need a really strong dosage. Do you find that that's not, if they're saying that to you, does that raise eyebrows, or do you take that on board as, look, for whatever reason, this person has a very high tolerance to anything that is foreign to the brain?
Yeah, look, some people do have a high tolerance, but it's got nothing to do with whether they've taken other substances before or anything like that. It's purely to do. It's got a lot to do, with the individual's mindset, all a whole heap of personal factors, what their expectations are, what their mindset is, what their intention is. So I've had people, that I've helped, that I've coached, for example, who have come to me and they've been on every substance under the sun and been addicted to all of them. And they said, look, I'm going to have to take a lot more than everybody else. And that's not the case. We start them out at the normal, level, and go through it and explain to them, how to do that, how to proportion it up, and all the rest of that. And then they gradually go up through the scale. But the most important thing is, when you take this stuff, if you have a definite intention of what you're trying to do, if you understand your expectations and what they are, and you're able to let go of that, and your mindset when you're doing this, that has a massive impact on where you're going. And it also depends on what you're trying to shift. Your intention.
We're talking intention. Yeah,
exactly.
Your intention shapes a lot of the experience.
It does.
And that makes a lot of sense when you talk about the mind, the power of the mind being able to really focus on.
And this really shocks, this really shocks people who have been taking drugs, because they view this as being a drug, but it's not. It's not a drug. You actually have to intentionally work with this, especially at the microdosing level. At the microdosing level, it is very, very, very subtle. So, to jump into a bit of science, what's actually happening is that...
I don't like the word subtle.
Well, what's actually happening is, when you take psilocybin, for example, it binds very effectively to the 5-HT2A receptor sites. Now, these are the neuron receptor sites that we have in our brain. And the 2A receptor sites are mostly in our subconscious mind, and especially in the default mode network of the subconscious mind. And that mostly works along the lines where we all of our learned behaviors, our patterns, our memories, and a lot of cognition comes from that area as well.
Operating system?
Yeah.
You're talking operating system.
Yeah, basically the operating system. Now, when we take the subliminal doses or the micro doses, and we avoid, the classic trip, where you get the hallucinations and stuff like that, the brain actually is now able to focus solely on the cognitive boost that it's getting, right? And the extra connectivity with the rest of the brain. And this is where all of the good stuff then starts to happen, because you're not having the psychedelic effects. But you need to do it over an extended period of time, right? And, you actually need to have a protocol that you're doing it to, and you have to be very, intentional about it. You can just pop the little, crush up the mushrooms, put them in a little capsule and swallow them, and go nowhere. But if you include your intention and your mindset and all that kind of stuff with it as well, which we've all been taught how to do, but it's very hard to do that. But with the aid of the psilocybin in the system as well, it gets a lot easier and a lot more effective when we do it.
Letting the psilocybin do its thing, align to your intention, and then being able to adjust the dosage It's that I don't like the word dosage, and I don't like the word subtle.
No.
But it's that subtle. It is subtle, but it's also aligning that intention to, why, what's the purpose? How are you channeling or guiding?
Yeah. What do you want? Yeah. What do you want? What are you looking for?
Yeah. The magic mushroom. What do you want it to help you achieve? And that sort of is manifestation, and it is coming back to that understanding the mind and being crystal clear on your intention. We're talking about overcoming addiction or trauma, or what am I really trying to do here, which comes back to your goal.
Yes.
That makes absolute sense. The reason I've got a little bit of an issue with the word subtle, because I've just, every time I hear the word subtle, I think of that line from Elon Musk: if aliens are here, we haven't seen them, but if they're here, they are very subtle. And I'm like, come on, Elon.
They've been flying around getting caught on cameras for bloody years.
It's probably him.
Yeah.
It's probably Elon.
Well, he might actually be one, for as far as all we know.
And there's my other issue here is dose.
Yeah.
I just think.
Well, we're using classic drug terms to describe something that isn't actually a drug. And it's like, and look, we, as far as science goes, we're so far behind the ball here, right? Because what we're talking about is we know that it binds to the 2A receptor sites, right? So we're talking about neuron receptors. Now, we've only in the last 6 months, a paper was released. And we've always thought that you know about neurons in the brain, and then there's a little gap, and that sends messages across the gap, right? And we've always thought that's purely chemical, right? And everybody's been happy with that concept for a long time. But we now know that those two individual neurons, we know that they can communicate 7 different ways now, right? And one of those ways that they can communicate, other than chemical, is through sheer vibration, right? So, which we know, vibration is everything, frequency is everything. And so these things are communicating through frequency as well. Now, when you are setting an intention, right, you are telling your subconscious mind, this is something that I want, right? And it tries to give it to you, right? But generally what happens is it's like, okay, I'd like to stop drinking. Excellent. Everybody agrees, right? And then you try to stop that process, but underlying all of that is a built-in pattern that's being run in the background, and it's a lot more powerful than your conscious mind, until you start doing things like psilocybin, which actually allows a lot more connectivity in a good way across the brain. Now you're leveling the playing field. Now you actually might start kicking some goals.
Yeah, so, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. What type of people are accessing microdosing? And obviously the why is different for the individual. Yeah. So some people are looking for a competitive edge. Some people are looking to activate creativity. Some people are looking to overcome addiction or trauma. I'm pretty sure some people might microdose just to relax.
There's a heap of science out there. Microdosing for people who are depressed, ADHD or ADD, cluster headaches, migraines, obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorders, premenstrual syndrome. So the women who are going into menopause and struggling with that, it also helps there, as well as, period pain and stuff like that. Hair loss, addiction, recovery from stroke, allergies,
Brian,
social
you can't
anxiety.
use mushrooms for hair loss. Surely not.
You can. And that's the studies are out there. It's proven. Like there's a study taking place right now with a bunch of ex-athletes who had massive spinal injuries, and some of these people are able to get up and hold their own weight. Now, these are people with high-level spinal injuries who were basically wheelchair bound and can't feel anything from the neck down. But some of these people are now standing up with the aid of a couple of crutches. Now, they're not running around playing football, but they shouldn't be able to stand up either, but they are, right? And the scientists scrambling like mad to find out what the hell is going on. But the brain is an incredibly powerful tool, and we have no idea what it's capable of. We have no idea.
No, we don't. We talked last time about the 95% inactive.
Yep. Yeah.
So what is possible with the other 95%? Mind-boggling.
Exactly.
And anyone that's familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, I've been following his work for many years around just the power of manifestation, healing the body with the mind, through thought. It's a very medical realm that's not mainstream.
No.
Isn't it? It's not a mainstream medical realm. You're considered if you're healing yourself from cancer through meditation, that's considered quacky.
Well, none of the money wants to go there. So there's no studies being done on this kind of stuff because the money doesn't want to go there. So Big Pharma can't sell you something like that. So it won't fund the research.
Yes. Didn't laugh.
So
evil.
It's really funny actually. There's not a lot of studies on microdosing either. When there are a lot of studies, but it's very difficult to do studies on microdosing because you can't. You can, but it's very hard to do the double-blind experiment. So someone has to get a placebo. So your standard double-blind experiment is that we've got a you and I found this plant, and if you eat it, it cures you of cancer. So we have to do a double-blind experiment. So what we have is we've got 100 people, 50 people get the plant, and 50 people get something that's similar to the plant but isn't the plant, and they don't know what they're getting, right? And the reason why we have to do that is because if we told those 100 people, right, that we're giving them this new plant and it cures cancer, and all we did was give them sugar tablets, nearly 30% of them, sometimes even higher, would cure their cancers. And we've known this for, decades, and nobody is studying how that is possible. But we actually, every time we come up with something new, we have to test it against a double blind, because if you get on a study program and you think you've been given this new cool drug, you're highly likely to cure yourself. It's called the placebo effect.
Hang on. No. Fascinating. Because when you think about it, give me the 30%. What are they doing? How are they thinking? How are they operating? Let's understand how they have activated the placebo, because they probably don't even know. But maybe they have an incredibly optimistic ability to be able to subconsciously change and heal themselves, and they don't even know.
Well, it gets worse.
It's like when you cut your hand, Brian, you cut your hand, right?
Yep.
Explain to me how that heals.
Yeah.
You're not consciously doing it.
No.
The body's going to work.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So this to me is a really interesting.
Well, it gets worse.
Dig into.
It gets worse because there are multiple recorded examples of people who healed themselves, even though they only got the placebo. Then they were told that they had the placebo, and they remanifested the disease, and then were given another placebo and cured themselves again. There are multiple examples of that in literature. And the reason why we struggle to do double-blind experiments with microdosing psilocybin, for example, is because anybody who's had any psilocybin knows when they're not getting it. So you can't trick it. You can't trick the body. Even with chemicals that are designed to trick, still can't.
But that's the faith element, Brian.
Yeah.
Faith.
Well, that's another whole rabbit hole. Yeah.
Every spiritual scripture based, whether it's organized traditional religion, there's an element of faith.
Yeah.
And there's something in that I'm convinced has been bastardized.
Oh, of course.
But it's the power of intention.
Yeah.
But you've got to do the work on that. Not many people are willing to sit down and meditate for 3 hours a day to tune in and to really focus their mind on the intention and to understand
very
how
hard
to
work.
disconnect. It's hard work. It is hard work.
But
so
interview anybody who's ever won a gold medal and ask them if they spent any time visualizing winning the gold medal, or whether they just rocked up one day and thought they'd have a crack.
Huge science behind visualization. Yeah, making it real. That's a form of rehearsal, which ties into the outliers, Gladwell, 10,000 hours of practice, the visualization. That's science now. People accept that, the power of visualization, but we haven't quite got to the point of using that same mechanism to heal ourselves.
Well, we're not teaching it to the masses.
Reprogram ourselves.
Yeah.
No, we're not teaching to the masses. Hence why this is such a fascinating area that we've got to help get the message out. It's still murky though and ambiguous, and there's still elements to this that you don't.
Well, it's because you can do it wrong, and this is the thing. This is why it's really important to have, somebody, like myself to coach you through this, because you can do it wrong. So, oh no, I tried microdosing and it didn't work. So one of the things, for example, is you've got to have a protocol, right? And what we mean by a protocol is you've got to have a schedule. You can't just eat mushrooms every day and be fine, because there's a reason they're non-addictive. If you just have mushrooms every day, if you microdose every day, it'll just stop working. Right, so there are a number of different protocols.
Just say that's enough. That's enough.
Yeah,
that's enough.
There are a number of different protocols.
You're abusing me.
Yeah, basically,
just
the
give
mushrooms
yourself
help out.
I respect you and I love you. Just give me some space. Okay. Yeah. See you soon. Love it.
Well,
that's a beautiful thing about it. Alcohol, you just keep drinking, Brian.
That's right.
Alcohol is one of those things you just keep drinking. There's no respect.
Yep. Yeah. Until you can't stand up, and
that's bad. Hey, a couple of things here, Brian. The we want to touch on that. Is it what you specifically do? But before that, I want us to dig a little bit more into this concept of dosage. Even the microdosing could be perceived as a placebo.
Yeah, well, plenty of scientists out there claiming that it is, which is not. We've got science now that proves that it's not intention. We know that even after a single microdose, you can see physical changes in the brain. So that's not placebo. Yeah, but I often have people coming back. I had a real hard case. He was a veteran with so much trauma you couldn't poke a stick at. They should make a movie about him, but he was seeing multiple psychiatrists, and within a couple of weeks of him starting to microdose at the lowest possible level, the psychiatrists were noticing a very distinct difference, right? And one of them stood in the doorway and said, "I can't let you leave here until you tell me what you're doing." So he did. Then he rang me and said, "Is it okay if I tell him about you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And so I told him what we were doing. I told the psychiatrist what we were doing. And he said, "Well, I've seen all these things, but it's got to be a placebo." And I said, "Well, what's the difference?" I said, "You're asking this man to change the way he thinks. He has. Who fucking cares?" Excuse the language. Who cares whether it's a placebo or not? Because the brain has changed. So, but the fact is, hard science, it's not a placebo. It actually makes physical changes in the brain. So
if you want to upgrade your software, it's one element to...
Absolutely.
But there's many ways to upgrade the software.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And changes with your friend. I'm assuming it was a friend or someone that you know?
No, just a client.
A client. What does he say has specifically changed?
So for him, so hardcore PTSD, for example, is very evident in the default mode network, the part of the subconscious part of the brain where there are very hard, rigid patterns. And what happens is there's a lot of connectivity between the conscious mind and the default mode network, and there shouldn't be that much, right? So what happens is you start living in the default mode. You don't get an option to do anything different. You become very, very rigid in your thinking. You can't accept new ideas. You can't be creative. You can't do any of these things. So a lot of people, for example, get relief by deliberately doing creative things like learning how to finger paint or something, or coloring in, which is very hard to convince an ex-soldier that he needs to buy a coloring in book. But what happens when the psilocybin kicks in is that you downgrade that connectivity. It's still there, but you deregulate it enough so that you consciously, are able to interject and go, "I don't want to play out the same pattern." So I'll give you I'll give you an example, a personal example, for example. So when I discovered microdosing years ago, I started microdosing and I'm like, yeah, not getting anything, can't feel anything, probably nothing happening. But anyway, I'll follow it through. I'd made up X amount of capsules and I thought I'll just keep going, right? And on my way to work one morning, I got cut off in traffic by an absolute idiot who, nearly caused 3 accidents in cutting across 3 lanes of traffic, totally oblivious to everybody else. And that is very triggering. Now, PTSD relies on a bunch of triggers in our conscious world, which then triggers the subconscious programs to take over. Now, for me, when that guy cut me off in the traffic, that triggered a subconscious program, right? You absolute idiot, right? It triggers a whole heap of anger. It triggers adrenaline. It triggers all kinds of stuff, right? Yeah. And so now you are in a subconscious program and your chances of being able to consciously extract yourself from that are very, very small. But when you microdose, and I had been microdosing, I caught myself in that moment going, hey, this is really silly behavior because this guy's gone. I'm not explaining anything to him. He's gone and he doesn't care anyway. And I am now carrying a bunch of really negative energy, like I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm on my way to work, and like this guy, I'm punishing myself now for something that this idiot did, and he doesn't even care. And I'm going to continue to punish myself for most of the day. I need to stop doing that. And I caught myself in the moment. Now that's nearly impossible to do, right? Because those subconscious programs are extremely powerful.
But Brian,
the subconscious mind is 95% more powerful than we are.
But that's flicking from That's flicking from player to observer.
Yes, it's exactly what.
And that's something I really want to dig into here.
In that moment, and that is very powerful because quantum physics 101. The moment you observe something, you change the outcome. And I observed the behavior that wasn't benefiting me, and I was like, wow. And I drove off and I let go of the anger and all the rest of it. And then I started thinking, of course, okay, well, if I can do that to that pattern, I wonder how many other patterns I'm running here. How many other patterns do I have that I believe in full-heartedly when they're happening, thinking this is justified, but at the end of the day, they aren't serving me.
So, layers here. This is something that I've been digging into a lot, Brian, is trying to find the truth. And everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's an expert. Everybody, a lot of people you listen to on different podcasts and books, and they've all got an opinion. They're all presenting ideas in a certain way with a belief system that they have a strong conviction in. So I'm just trying to filter through all the information and find out what feels right. And one thing that I think from the observer's perspective is what I'm realizing is that is a conscious decision. When you think about consciousness, it's being aware of when to be the observer and when to be the player, and how everything connects to this superconscious. If you think about conscious, subconscious, superconscious. Superconscious being the ultimate source connection, the ultimate Wi-Fi. We're all connecting into that somehow. The superconscious, the conscious, and then the subconscious. We're talking about operating system. The conscious is being able to flick between the different ways of tuning in to reality. So that observer, something that I've been working on is knowing when to flick the switch, so to speak, in a simple way, to be the observer. So if I'm highly stressed, triggered, traumatized, angry, training myself to flick into observer, because then it removes me from the conscious feelings of the emotions, and I'm able to be more present. But then to be the player when I'm needing to be fully present, because these things are extremely enjoyable, or there's love, or there's genuine genuine human connection related to what I'm doing. Immerse yourself in the player, and then when you are under stress, observe.
I would take the analogy even further and say run observer mode all the time, but just keep it minimized on the what's a little bar on the end of the bottom of the computer?
We got two screens going, player observer.
Just minimize it so that you can access it any time, because like you said, you can't live your life in observer mode. And entering that observer mode is what psilocybin is really good at doing, is being able to get you to that point. But you should also filter everything you're about to do through observer mode. Why am I about to do this? Why am I about to have this reaction? Why am I having this emotion? But you can't live in observer mode because you just become disconnected. So we have to stay connected, which is a point you were making before. But just have it there all the time, and just keep running everything you're about to do through observer mode. What am I going to get out of this? So getting angry in the car, for example, wasn't going to achieve me anything, and yet that was my instinct. So pointless.
Well, you're observing how the operating system is reacting and responding to reality through its physical manifestation.
So you're choosing to be conscious about subconscious programs. You're always going to have subconscious programs, but you're choosing to try to be as conscious of them as you possibly can. That means you're actually taking charge of your life instead of running on autopilot.
When the AI becomes sentient. The AI is becoming sentient.
Yes.
You know what I
that's
mean?
another whole. That's another whole. There's another whole podcast to that. Yeah.
Everything's running on an operating system, a human biological operating system that's being fed information constantly. Like ChatGPT is learning; it's constantly learning. Yeah. It's evolving.
It gets better at helping you the more information you get it.
Yeah. So humans are programmed in a very similar way.
We are. And we need to understand that, because most people don't. Your reactions aren't coming from the immediate environment. They're coming from previous environments. Now, we tend to compartmentalize everything. So, if you've got a whole heap of trauma around women, for example, every time you talk to a woman, you're subconsciously expecting her to behave exactly like the other ones did. And to the point where you can actually start self-sabotaging. That's how powerful the subconscious can be when you've got those programs. And that's an example of where you need to be, in the observer effect, going, why am I expecting the worst from this person? I've never met this person before. This person has never done anything bad to me. Why would I expect them to do it? And what are the benefits of expecting them to be bad?
Well, that's a lot of people refer to having to do the work, the inner work. I've been doing a lot of research on the inner work because I've got my new book coming, The Inner Warrior aspect of that is understanding self. We are going to talk very specifically about ego in a subsequent chat.
Oh yeah, that's a big rabbit hole. That one.
We've got that locked in, so we won't dig too deep there.
Remind me to talk to you about the similarities between ego and AI.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. I'm going to make a note of that, ego AI. I remember the first time I ever had. I don't drink. I don't smoke marijuana.
Yep.
But my first time in my teens, my friends were off their rockers and I felt nothing. And I thought, what's wrong with me? Give me more. So I had to have more. And then when I got more, it was the first time I felt outside of my body, as I felt like I was observing. And this would have been, I don't know, 19 or so. And it was terrifying because I was almost in that super conscious. I had a sense of I was now observing.
Yeah.
The first, and it was obviously an altered state, a new state to the brain. And I didn't like it because I felt out of control.
Well, there's research just come out just recently that that marijuana in particular doesn't enhance neuroplasticity, right? So what you're feeling there is disassociation almost. And a lot of people who smoke marijuana are going to hate this. But the difference between marijuana and psilocybin, for example, there's a lot of things going on at the same time. So when psilocybin starts to work, it increases neuroplasticity, i.e., you're able to view the same problem in a different way. You can see more information all of a sudden. It actually promotes neural pathways to grow, actually creates new neurons in the brain. And then it also dials down the default mode network, which means that you can now create new software and not just fall into the old software's patterns. Now, things like marijuana don't do all those other things. And so what it can do, though, is give you a nice break going, you know what, I've had a very stressful day, blah, blah, blah. What I want to do is disassociate. Very similar to what alcohol does. Marijuana is heaps better for you than alcohol, by the way. But nevertheless, there are other things that you could be taking that are going to be a hell of a lot better than that.
Yes. Well, I'll have to another smoke again of some pure stuff. But I haven't done it in years because I just I didn't like that feeling at that time of my life. I didn't like the disassociation or the feeling.
I've never achieved anything good on it either.
Yeah, but not disregarding it, but
it helps. There's plenty of people who swear that it helps them, and sure.
Yeah, and again, it's finding something that works for you. I've got a good friend, and he's very curious about psilocybin.
Yep.
But he's cautious because he has a low tolerance to things.
Yep.
I think he's quite fearful of losing control. I know some people are very fearful of losing control.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily saying he's fearful of losing control, but I can relate to that from my first marijuana experience, feeling like I'd lost control.
Yep.
Now I'd probably really enjoy losing control.
Alcohol's the same. People do things on alcohol and they're horrified the next day.
Yeah.
There's no way that something like that happens on psilocybin, regardless of what dosage you take. It just doesn't happen.
Yes. Well, that we're not talking about hero's journey, because hero's journey is a complete obliteration sometimes of losing complete control.
Well, if you take over a certain amount, you can lose your concept of self, and you have a different experience. But when you're saying you're losing control, you cease to be you, but you don't run around doing crazy things like jumping out of windows and punching strangers in the face or something like that.
You cease to be you,
yeah, that's how I would define losing control.
Yeah.
No one's ever harmed anybody on mushrooms. When you look at the harm studies universally around the globe, all chemicals, there's harm studies done every year, and psilocybin and LSD are right down the bottom. And there's two phases to the study. There's harm to self and harm to others. And psilocybin and LSD, there is zero harm to others. And it's actually been proven to actually lower the crime rate.
Yeah.
And that the only time it registers so low that they actually have to combine LSD and psilocybin together to make it register at all. And the only reason why it registers is because people have a bad trip. In other words, they feel uncomfortable. But that's a whole different. There's a reason for that, and it's to do with guidelines and doing it properly in the right place and not mixing it with other things and stuff like that. So that's another whole story. We can get into that when we talk about.
Yeah, gotcha. But for people that want to microdose, what are the real benefits? It talked about some of the reasons people might want to explore microdosing.
I'd like to cover off on the protocols first, because this is where people go wrong right from the start. Is they think, okay, I finally found myself some mushrooms and I'm going to microdose, so I'm just going to take a chunk out of this one and eat it. It's like, no, that is the road to problems. Okay, so first of all, get the dosage right. And what we're talking about here in the dosage, with
Can we find
the
a better name for
psilocybin
dose?
Amount, when we take a certain amount,
Leave that one with me. I'm going to come up with a better name.
You work out. You tell me what word you want to use.
Dose.
So you got to work out how much you're taking, and this has a lot to do with the potency of the mushroom you're taking. And mushrooms aren't mushrooms. We can have the same species of mushroom, and you found some golden teachers in Melbourne, and I found some golden teachers in Cairns. That doesn't mean they're the same potency. In fact, the same mushroom, just a different crop of the same mushroom, the same batch of mushrooms can have a different potency. So you've got to be very, very careful of your source where you're getting the product from. Very, very careful. And you want to get to know the people who are growing it.
It's not a product.
Well,
it's not a dose, and it's not a product.
It's a medicine is what it is. And so you've got to get your head around who's growing your medicine and who they are, right? If you're buying it from some dodgy guy on the street corner who's also got his other pocket full of, meth and ice and all the rest of that, well, that's probably not the dude to be buying mushrooms off of. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
no, gotcha.
And also, you've also got to have your protocol, and there are a number of different protocols, and you have different protocols for different things. Okay, so there are people, for example, who microdose for sleep, and so they would use a nightcap protocol where they would take it at night, right? But if you're microdosing to basically become a better person, to deal with your trauma or your PTSD or your anxiety or whatever, then you should be microdosing first thing in the morning. Now, the other thing to get your head around too is how much you microdose. So, there's lots of different, probably one of the most popular ones, Dr. Fadiman, which we'll go into him a bit later when we talk about the history of microdosing. But his protocol is 1 day on, 1 day off. You must have those days off, because if you just take it one after the other every day, it just stops working, right?
It stops working.
So
have a little break.
So his one is 1 day on, 1 day off. Now the Microdosing Institute, it says 1 day on. Fadiman says 1 day on, 2 days off. The Microdosing Institute says 1 day on, 1 day off. Right? They go a bit more hardcore. And now that's just straight microdosing, and you can also stack, which we'll get into a bit later. But my preferred method with microdosing is 2 days on, 1 day off. Now, mostly because most of the people who come to us as coaches have usually got some heavy lifting to do. They've got big stuff to move. They've got addictions to deal with. They've got big trauma to deal with, or something like that, right? And so 2 days on, 1 day off is a fairly hardcore program, but still giving you that day off so that you don't build up tolerance and you give yourself a break,
So, Brian, I prefer 20 days on, 1 day off.
Yeah. Well, the last 10 days is probably just a waste of mushrooms.
Well, yes, true.
Because you're building up a tolerance.
You got to find so you just increase the dose.
Increasing the dose is a waste of good mushrooms.
Yeah, it is. It's finding what works for you.
Okay.
The dosage or the amount varies. I think for me as well, the 2 on, 1 off seems to be a very, very commonly accepted way of activating. But yeah, it's interesting. The nightcap one I haven't come across. I didn't realize you could do it for nightcap. Yeah, interesting.
And look, I had a bunch of guys come through in a bit of a cohort. I started coaching a guy who was fly in, fly out. And the problem with fly in, fly out is when they're out in the middle of nowhere and they've been working 12 hours a day, and they want to, deregulate, downgrade, slow down. What do? They drink, because that's the only thing they can do. And so they drink, and so they all end up as alcoholics. They always drink too much. So these guys, well, it is. It's a shocking thing. It's like we can go into the whole details about how bad alcohol is. That's a whole podcast by itself. But these guys, we changed the rules with them, right? And we gave them a much higher microdose. So it was borderline micro. So this was a different species of mushroom, which is very potent. We used that one, and we got them to microdose when they got back from work, right? And so they would take the microdose, and then they would go down to the boozer with their mates. But instead of having 6 or 7 beers, they would only have 1 or 2. And they still felt relaxed and all the rest of it, and they had better sleep and all the rest of that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden got their alcoholism under control, because basically what they were was binge drinkers. They refused to drink when they got home because they realized how bad it was. But as soon as they got to work, they were back into binge drinking mode, and they couldn't help themselves. So these microdosing protocols can be adapted, for what you want. For example, if you've got ADHD or any of those kinds of conditions, you will need a much higher microdose than somebody else. And it's still very, very effective. The protocols is that you don't do this forever. You're not swapping one thing for another. Microdosing is usually for a set program. So, we run our programs over 3 months, for example. You don't want to do it any more than that. And people always ask me, it's like, well, you obviously know how to get this stuff. Don't you microdose all the time? And the answer is no. So my partner and I, we now microdose randomly, or intuitively, probably more correct, gotcha, when we feel we need to.
Yeah, you see the dog, an animal will just start chewing grass for a reason.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, you can also, when it comes to the microdosing, you can also do what they call stacking, right? Which there's been a lot of research done into this lately. And Paul Stamets is probably the world's leading expert on mushrooms, and he has a stacking protocol.
Is it Dose? So what? Is it Dose? His documentary, Dose? Is that his documentary?
He's in that. Yes, he's in that. Yeah. He's in. Can't remember the other program. It was on Netflix for ages. Can't remember. Gone out of my head. But yeah, he has developed a protocol whereby you take the microdose. You also take lion's mane mushroom, which is a known brain-enhancing mushrooms. It stabilizes neural pathways. A lot of people with Alzheimer's and stuff like that are getting big results just by taking lion's mane, which has no psychedelic effect whatsoever. But the other thing that he stacks onto that is niacin, or vitamin B3. And it's a blood vessel dilator. So it kind of speeds up the integration of the psilocybin throughout the body, right? Not just into the neural networks in the brain, but throughout the whole body. There's a bit of a downside to that, because when you're taking niacin, you can get what they call the flush effect, which it gives you like pins and needles, and it can make your skin go red for a while, and it can be a little bit uncomfortable for a bit, but that is a really if you're really serious about it, stacking is quite hardcore. We recommend lion's mane, but only after maybe to be honest, not until you start getting the observer effect. When you start experiencing the observer effect, and this is where the coaching comes in, we go, right, now start taking the lion's mane, because you've changed neural pathways and created new neural pathways in your brain. Now let's stabilize them. Now, I don't have any science around that, only anecdotal stuff that we've noticed in our clients.
Some people might respond, well, I don't want to be the observer. I'm happy just being the player.
And they're going to be stuck in their mode forever. That's the thing. This is where the individual comes in. You must want to change. You can take this stuff and not change anything. And so what would be the point? You've got to want to actually change, i.e. you want to observe your own behavior. Now, that's not necessarily comfortable all the time.
Well, it could come back to self-discipline.
Yeah.
Because that's somebody that has really, for whatever reason, very low inability to follow through on things, to focus, to have the determination to, to stick to goals, to, for whatever reason, they just lack discipline.
Yeah.
because this does take a level of discipline. Change does take discipline.
Yes.
If you really want to change habits and upgrade your operating system because it's not serving you, the way that you're operating in the world is not serving you in some way or in very specific ways, then there's a level of not just the intention, which we talked about earlier, but the discipline to be able to follow through and to stick to it. Because you can start microdosing. Okay, I want to stop drinking. I'm going to start microdosing. 2 months down the track, I'm still drinking. So the mushrooms are not working. Might be the excuse.
Yes.
So is it just a matter of then when you come talking about coaching, is it okay, we've got to increase the dose, or is it more to do with the individual?
It's definitely the individual. And this is where I was hinting at before. And, to just clarify one of the comments that you made there before, we need to also understand that lack of self-discipline is a trauma response, right? Basically, I'm just a leaf in the wind and I have to go wherever the wind blows me. I'm not in charge of my life. That's a trauma response. So just because you say, oh, this isn't going to work for me because I lack discipline, that lack of discipline is a trauma response, and you will definitely get a chance to deal with that. But this is where that the ability to actually want to change. There's no way you can stop drinking if you don't understand that you're an alcoholic. This is something that we understood a long time ago. You have to actually want to change, but there are thousands of people out there who want to change quite desperately, but cannot break that cycle. This is where microdosing or even macrodosing later on, when we talk about that, comes into play here, because what you're doing is you're trying to override an extremely powerful subconscious program. And it doesn't matter how determined you are in your conscious mind, which represents about 5% of the power usage of the brain.
Gotcha.
That massive subconscious program is going to roll over the top of you like a steamroller. And
gotcha.
And so you can do all the talk therapy in the world until you can get to the point where you can actually make the change, choose to make the change, and continue to choose to make the change, because it's not a one-time thing. Nothing's going to change, So this is where the intent comes in, and there are things that we can do to help with the intent. So, for example, there are a couple of really good phone apps now that have come out, which can really help you with that intent. And this is one of the ways that you can increase the likelihood of getting positive outcomes out of microdosing. So there are tracking apps out there. And so what these are, there's an app you got on your phone and you put into it what you're taking, when you're taking it, what your protocol is, 2 days on, 1 day off. And you can start putting things in there, like you can record what are my intentions here and all the rest of that. But also it gives you all these little click button things going, how do you feel today? I'm depressed, I'm not depressed, I'm this, I'm that, I'm that. There are little cognitive tests that you can do, like tapping tests, for example. How fast can you tap your 2 fingers on the screen? And the phone will measure that and goes, it's this. And people find that after they start microdosing, that nervous system starts to reset, and all of a sudden your tap scores increase. That's one of the ways that we test people's nervous systems and how overloaded their nervous systems are. But it does a lot more than that, because you can break it into 4 different areas, basically. So the first thing that it does is it helps you be prepared for the experience. So it helps you, it forces you to set an intention. It also provides a baseline for you. So what am I like now? Okay, because if you can't see progress, you start losing hope. And it also will help you determine over time the right amount to take, i.e. 0.2s work for me, 0.3s are a bit much, 0.2s don't work for me, I need 0.3s, or what, 0.1s is working fine, I'll stick to that, And the second thing it does is it will keep you focused. So by deliberately engaging with the app, you are deliberately staying focused, which means that you are thinking about your intent. Now, the more you think about it, the more times a day that you do this, the more you stay focused on what you're actually trying to do here. So it forces you to be conscious about what you're doing, right?
It's almost like you do need a tribal element. It takes a village, doesn't it? So
Yes.
this is sort of another extension of that. But
pretty much.
I just wanted to touch on that because there's so many apps. Anything you want is an app for it.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what you're doing. But the tribal element too, I just find sometimes this is a bit of a lonely journey.
Yeah, it is.
If you are really an outlier in your social group.
Yep.
Because you are typically, it's not a collective decision to want to change your life. It's an individual decision.
Well, but here's
the find the tribe of people that have.
True.
You know what I mean? That to me, how can we link that in, Brian? Because that's a big.
Well, I'm missing
that myself.
The tribe thing. What happens is eventually you start changing your tribe, right?
The vibration, and you start attracting.
Because you want to change. So there is, and the problem with bringing tribe into this is that we have a natural tendency to look outside of ourselves to solve this problem, which is an internal problem. There is no way, there's no way on earth, no matter how much you pay me as a coach, that I can actually solve the problem for you. Gotcha. I can use the right words and keep triggering you, and I can get very skilled at telling you, dude.
Being a psychologist, a mushroom psychologist.
Right. Yep, the mushroom psychiatry, and saying, but at the end of the day, you have to do it. I can't do it for you, and no amount of talking to me is going to make that happen. You will eventually choose to do something differently.
This is a very good point that you make, because that inner warrior, it's the inner explorer. So that's sort of where the answers are, in my view. The ability to go in deep in inner work, which is meditation. You can do it with breath work. But
it's observation. That is used. A lot of these things are the same. We've got lots of different names for them, and all the rest of it.
It's in the consciousness. It's light. It feels like light. When you go into the light world, which is when you go deep into the meditation, which I must admit, microdosing for me helps me go way deeper than I can normally meditating.
Yeah, of course.
It seems to open up something in my brain that takes me right in much deeper. Yeah. And some would say, but you're fast tracking that. That should be done naturally. Well, the places that I can go when I'm microdosing, meditating, just defy logic. They don't make sense. It's just like it's almost like you're tapping into something that is like a program that you are, like a game, and you're going to the next level. It seems to be something I want to talk about when we talk about the hero's journey. But that inner work is where the tribe is, potentially. They're in there. It's the inner
at the end of the day, you've got to come to terms with the fact that you are the tribe, right? And yes, you will naturally start gravitating to people who are like you again. But at the end of the day, you start to understand, and this is one of the biggest lies that have ever been told to us, is like help comes from outside. Change comes from outside. You can't talk to God unless you're part of this religion. Blah, blah, blah. It's all the same. It's all the same lie, right? And this is why, something like a microdosing app, for example, can keep you on track, because it basically takes the place of what you're, referring to as a tribe to help keep you on track.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the ways that it can do that also is because you're monitoring your process, you start seeing that you are changing. That gives you courage to keep going. That's like someone saying, "Attaboy, pat you on the back," right? It keeps you going. But also, once you start getting to that point, it actually helps you take action. You go, okay, I can actually drive the ship. I'm standing here at the wheel and I point the wheel that way and the ship goes that way, and I point the wheel this way and the ship goes that way. I'm actually driving the ship here, whereas we tend to think, oh no, you're not allowed to drive the ship. Other people drive the ship and you're just a frigging passenger and now, do as you're told,
Driving the ship. I want to come back here, Brian. Sorry, because I'm stuck on this. I can't get excited about the app tracker, to be honest, but I understand its benefit. I want to get off the device, but that I do sense when you are when you're in that inner light realm, that is outrageous in its visuals, that I do feel like you get then into the observer and the player.
Yeah.
So it feels like I'm running through a program, like a preset program. Like I sort of see the same things at the start. But as I go deeper, it's like a program I'm activating is learning how to fly in that program and have the conscious ability to be able to do whatever I want in there. As opposed to just things coming at me, I'm just looking at them going, wow, and I'm moving through things in the thought realm to be able to be so present in that thought realm that I can start to create, I can start to drive. I can drive it as opposed to feeling like I'm reacting to what is coming at where I am.
So here's the
thing. Does that make sense to you, Brian?
Yes, but I want to challenge some of the thinking. So here's the thing. People have been creating what you're achieving there when you're doing that is you're achieving an altered state of consciousness, right? So you're basically slowing down all the inputs and you're just allowing yourself to be for a moment, right? And we're very bad at doing.
Or is it deeper?
No, you're in an altered state of consciousness. Okay, because that's just a word. Altered basically means altered just basically means different to what you're in every day. So when you're not thinking about thinking, that's a normal state of consciousness. When you start thinking about thinking, you start altering your state of consciousness, right? And if you get really good at it, like with your meditation and stuff like that, then you can reach a point where you can slow that right down, right? But here's the thing. We don't achieve things in and when I say achieve things, all the way throughout history, some very, very famous people have invented massively big concepts that we use electricity, for example, right? All that kind of stuff, light bulbs, everything. A lot of these things were achieved in altered conscious states through various different ways, through breathing exercises, through nitrous oxide gas was a good one.
Alien tech,
yeah,
maybe.
Reverse
engineered.
Maybe, I'm not sure about that one. But the way you do that is not by going, aha, I've reached the altered conscious state, now I'm going to do something. You don't do anything. What you do is allow, right? That's the trick. What you do in that state is you just allow things to come to you. You have your intention when you go in. Yeah. Yes. I'm trying to solve this problem. That's my intention. And then you allow it to unfold. You don't make it unfold. It's very, very different. You have to allow. Because when you're trying to make something happen, you're reaching back into your subconscious mind looking for patterns and you're trying to run a pattern. And that's exactly what you were trying not to do when you entered the altered conscious state. I don't want to run any patterns. Yeah. I've tried all my patterns and I haven't found the solution to this problem. Now I need to let the solution come to me. Now, you can explain this in a very, very simple way. If you and I were having yeah, it is. It's an attempt at control.
Trying to control. Yeah, trying to control. Yeah, gotcha. I'm with you. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Letting go.
For example.
And letting go.
Yeah. So, for example, we were talking before about the movie with Paul Stamets in it. Now, I could not remember the name of that movie, right? Now, the harder I try to remember the name of that movie, the less chance it's going to come to me. So what did I do? I just let that go. I'd sent the message to the subconscious mind saying, hey, I need to remember the name of this movie, right? And then we moved on. Now, if you ask me the name of the movie, I can tell you now. It's called Fantastic Fungi, right?
Yes.
Because I allowed that to come through because I wasn't thinking about it. Stopped thinking about it. And it's the same thing. We talk about this when we talk about big journeys later on. We talk about surrendering, right? And that's what that means. It's like you're not in charge. I explain it to people like this. You've been driving your car and you're driving really badly and you've decided that really you should stop driving the car because you're really screwing it up. And so you decide that you're going to take a journey, right? And when you take that journey, you actually have to give up control of the car. You're now sitting in the passenger seat. And your higher self or your subconscious self or whatever you want to call it, whatever name you want to put to it, and we can get really complicated about this stuff, right? It's actually driving the car. Now, you actually have to have some faith that it's not going to kill you, right? But also, it's going to go where you're going to go. If you go into your journey going, I want to go here, I want to go here, I want to go here, no, it's not going to happen. Because the part of you that's making that choice is small compared to, if you go in with the quiet intent, go in with the intent, the subconscious knows where you want to go, but you know what? To get to there, you might have to go to here and here and here first, and so you have to relax and allow yourself to be a passenger in order to get the benefit of that.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
It's hard to do because you actually feel like you're giving up control, which is the exact opposite. Because we've been taught if you want to achieve something, Trent, you got to try harder and harder and harder and push and push and push and push. Very overly masculine and extremely ineffective.
Well, you got the superconscious, which I'm referring to in my own frame. Superconscious, conscious, subconscious. In that realm, there's definitely a connection between the superconscious and the subconscious.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Would you say?
I mean, it's you.
Is the observer. Yeah.
Well, the ultimate irony of you surrendering is that you're actually surrendering to yourself. Right? That's the ultimate irony out of all this. But most people will fight because the ego part of the self, which we're starting to creep into that now, wants to hang on to the status quo because it's trying to protect you from something that's unknown. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. And so it'll put up a fight, and hence the concept of a bad journey. This is where this comes from. If you haven't prepared yourself properly and haven't been coached properly and you've done something else wrong in the process leading up to this, then you will have this, or you don't take enough, for example, can leave you in this zone where you've taken enough to threaten your concept of self, but not enough to actually suppress the default mode network enough so that you can work with it. So you end up going to war with your subconscious programming. And it ends up just being one big, long argument in your head, right? And I refer to it as being a knife fight in a phone booth with yourself. And it's horrible. And hence the concept of bad journey. That's what people are referring to when they say a bad journey, because what you do is you start creating monsters, and now there's monsters everywhere.
Gotcha.
That's because the subconscious does not want you. The ego. Sorry, not the subconscious. The ego doesn't want you to go to those places that you want to go to, because it's like, no. We hid them for a reason. We hid that trauma that you experienced when you were 5 for a reason, because you couldn't cope with it. It's like, but I'm not 5 anymore.
Well, those doors are closed. Those rooms are closed, but they're still playing a role in how you think, how you operate.
I refer to it. I tell people it is like. It's like you've collected all of this radioactive waste over the years, and you decided that the best way to deal with it was to lock it in the attic. The fact is, the more you collect over the years, and let's refer to the radioactive waste now as being traumas, the more of those, and we all collect them. It doesn't matter what they are, how big they are, how small they are, we're all collecting them. But we don't deal with them. We lock them up in the dungeon, but it now sends that toxic radioactivity throughout our entire lives, and it perpetuates. It actually gets to the point where it actually starts to manipulate the information that our conscious minds are allowed to take in, because it doesn't fit the pattern that we're running. We're saying, okay, going back to, all women are bad and I can't have a good relationship because women are going to betray me. And now every woman I meet, my conscious mind is only looking for the telltale signs that what I believe to be, i.e., all women are going to stab me in the back and betray me in the end, is going to happen. And so in the end, I will actually perpetuate that to happen, because it actually feels better than waiting for it to happen. And that's how complicated and how ridiculous we get with this stuff.
You've mentioned that example a few times. of the women. Is that something that you've worked through?
No, it has, yes. Yeah, I actually had to work through that. Yeah. But it's also one that a lot of men have to work through. Relationships are a big cause of trauma in everybody's life, not just men and women and men as well, and relationships are a big form of trauma. And the more traumatized we become in that space, we start attracting people with opposite wounds. And we're basically just interacting with their wounds and they're interacting with our wounds. So the chances of having a good relationship get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the relationships get worse and worse and worse and worse because we haven't actually solved the core problem. And the core problem is we're not actually seeing all the information because our subconscious mind is literally forcing us to look through tainted glasses. So we literally can only see the problems, not the good things. And you would have met people like this who are so negative, they can't even say a positive thing. You say something positive, they immediately have to say something negative.
The trauma. You got to just be careful with this trauma stuff. Like, is it to be reframed trauma? Because in my world, everything's language. And language is very limited. Very limited. Like the universe, God doesn't speak English. The universe doesn't speak English. It's this simplified way that we interpret things and we understand things. It's based on the human language. And that's put into letters, it's put into words, it's put into syllables, it's put into sentences, it's put into,
it's very inefficient.
The way that we navigate and make meaning. So we know this, but it's like this trauma.
All trauma is, at its essence, right? All trauma is an unfinished experience. Right? That's all it is. It's an experience that you didn't finish properly. Problem is that it starts to combine. It starts putting layers on top of layers, right? Because we keep re-experiencing things.
It feeds on itself.
And it grows. For me, it gets bigger and bigger.
Well, the reason I'm mentioning it was because I had a stutter as a kid.
Yep.
Right. The stutter was very, very, very confusing. And I would get teased, even by people that I knew. They would find fun in it. I found it deeply hurtful. And it was almost a sense of betrayal. I thought you were my friend.
Yep.
Why are you teasing me as well?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like they didn't understand. They were kids. But now I get paid to speak.
So we got multiple different layers of trauma there. You've got
lots of trauma there. Yeah, that was one element. Yeah. And people can relate to that in their own ways. But I sort of talk about this a lot because it gave me a finely tuned sense of the English language, an appreciation of speaking I would marvel at how people would speak. So it gave me a deep appreciation for how do they do that? How does that go on TV?
You had to become very conscious of it because every word you had to be very careful about every word you selected. So, and you didn't want to. Yeah, and you didn't want to have a 50-word sentence when a 5-word sentence would have got the same message across because that's just more work, right? So you had to be made you very careful about it.
Yes, that is.
And look, this is the same with all traumas. Every single trauma has an upside, right?
But I'm just saying now I get paid to speak, right? So it's like, well, the trauma has turned into a superpower, but am I doing what I'm doing now because of that trauma? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it a positive or has it played, like I said, has it fed on itself to the point where, I'm now doing what I'm doing because of that trauma? I'm not sure, but it certainly has shaped my worldview at a very young age and gave me a very, very hyper-tuned awareness of communication and speaking. Yeah. And now now I speak.
Yeah. So, well, the ultimate test is this, right? I have in my possession a time machine. You and I can go back in time and we can delete that part of your experience, right? But you also miss out on all the benefits that experience gave you as well. Do you go back in time to do that? Would you push the button to delete that? That's the big question. The answer is the longer you think about it is no.
We make meaning of it.
We do.
Meaning of it.
We do. I had some horrendous relationships. Go back to relationship story again. Shocking. Right? Because I wasn't finishing the experience, right? I wasn't able to categorize that experience in my subconscious mind and goes, oh, that's what happened and this is why. I understand. What I would do is like, this is really painful. I don't want to feel this. And I would block it out, right? And therefore walk into the next relationship with exactly the same view of the world that I had when I entered the first relationship. So nothing had changed. So guess what? It ended up being the same relationship, different people wearing different hats, playing the same game, you know? So it would unfold again. And this is the thing. So the moment you're able to become an observer of that, you are much more likely to finish those experiences. So I could have, for example, a traumatic experience now with the aid of, psilocybin, my ability to observe myself, which I've honed, and so have you. I can now step into that and go, okay, what am I trying to teach myself here? Where is the upside here? What am I learning? How do I flip the script here? Instead of just feeling all sad and, it's like, yep, I wish that didn't happen, but it did. What can I take from it? How do I make sure it doesn't happen again? And get very quickly to finishing the experience. Now it's not a trauma. I can go back and relive the experience and it's unpleasant, but it's not a trauma. It's not a monster hiding under my bed, ruining my day.
Yeah, that's obviously there's many different examples that anyone can draw on from their early childhood that shaped things and traumatized them.
Very much. Early childhood is very common. Yes,
it's a perception of trauma as well. Like I think there's trauma, then there's different levels to it.
Yeah,
it's within.
Well, it's how that trauma manifests and how deeply rooted that is. One of the female clients I had, for example, she came to me and she's like, I'm just not coping with life. I don't know what's wrong. I've got a good marriage. I've got a good job. We're making good money. My kids are good kids, but I am just not coping with life, right? I have to deal with the fact that I'm not coping with life. Well, that's not true. What she had to deal with was what was bubbling up from the basement, which was, impeding her view of the life she already had, right? And so when she did a journey, for example, she went back and remembered a whole period of her life where she, was, basically, molested by a group of boys when she was about, 12 years old. And she could see in that moment, she didn't relive the moment, she understood what happened and also understood how her perspective and her perception of life changed as a result of that all the way through to now, and that she had been suppressing it so well for so long, she'd completely forgotten about it, right? Gotcha. It wasn't part of her conscious mind anymore, but the subconscious doesn't forget anything. So that program's running in the background and it had caught up with her. An incredibly powerful woman to have really, so successfully suppressed it for so long. But now that she was comfortable, that's why it was coming out, because she was comfortable. So she starts to relax a little bit. She's not so much in flight or flight mode anymore. She actually starts to relax a bit of it. And the subconscious is like, oh, good, we've got some time. How about we go back and fix up this glitch? And the emotions start to come through, and we don't recognize the emotions because we're not emotionally intelligent. That's been flogged out of us to be emotionally intelligent. We should be teaching our kids how to be emotionally intelligent. So instead of addressing the emotion as a signpost, she thought that's the issue.
Jesus. It's so hard to teach the kids though, because the kids are getting information from sources that are not aligned. And
Correct.
They are confused.
Yes.
Well, Dad's saying this, Mum's saying that, friend's saying that, Uncle John's saying that, the principal's saying that, my art teacher's saying this. Like at a young age when they're so impressionable, TikTok's saying this. You've got so many sources of information coming out.
It starts back at the toddler stage when we first start chucking tantrums. A tantrum is the body reacting to a mental overload. Why this thing that I want being denied to me. Nothing's ever been denied to me before. This is the way the world works. I want something, it's given to me. And all of a sudden, someone's taken that away. That sucks. And guess what? It does suck. Not getting what you want really sucks. So if we're capable at that stage of teaching the child, tap into what you're feeling, and able to release the energetics of the emotion, so that the brain can actually start functioning again. Because the brain's not functioning when you're in that state. The brain's not functioning. It's telling the child to stop chucking a tantrum when they're chucking a tantrum doesn't even compute. You might as well be speaking French.
Tommy, have you taken your mushrooms today? What's going on with the tantrum? Are you observing or not? First, they're chewing on the mushrooms.
Look, I saw one parent doing this, and I've not had any of my own kids. So
belting the shit out of the kids.
So well, you've seen that approach, but this one's just sat there, let it calm down, because there's nothing you can do in the middle of the storm. It's like, okay, what are you feeling right now? And the child had been trained to tell, I'm feeling really angry. Okay, feeling it. So we need to let go of the anger, otherwise we can't solve this problem. So let go of the anger, and so breathe in and out, breathe in and out. So basically telling the body that it's safe, right? So the body's reacting, the body doesn't think it's safe because the whole world's just caved in. So tell the body it's safe. The child starts to calm down. Right? Okay. Have we got past the anger? Good. Okay. Now let's talk about the problem. Right? You can't have lollies all the time. They're really not very good for you. And now we can discuss it rationally. But I really want the lollies. Yeah, I know we want them, but we can't have everything that we want all the time.
That's very.
Whereas having that discussion in the middle of the tantrum is pointless. Yeah. So you've got to downgrade it one step at a time. And it's the same with us.
Patience, though, Brian.
Oh, of course it does. And guess what?
The parent has to be patient enough in a
busy,
manic world with shit flying everywhere to be present enough to take the time to do that, and also to take the time to educate and teach and be present. That's a trap in the modern world, because everybody is so addicted to we're busy.
We don't bring up our kids. They're brought up at primary school, and they're brought up in the kindergarten.
That's true. So it's a parent's responsibility, but then the parent has to take responsibility for their own level of consciousness as well, because obviously they are passing trauma on to children. Grandparents are passing trauma on to kids.
Look,
it just goes down the line.
Well, you can talk about epigenetics, and passing on trauma and stuff like that is a very real scientifically proven thing. But again, that's another whole rabbit hole.
It makes sense if it's the biology. It's in the DNA. Of course, it makes absolute sense to me. I saw that past life regression therapy. I wanted to talk about, when we do the hero journey episode next, I want to talk about also hypnosis.
Yep.
You talk about completely rewiring the software, completely upgrading the software. Hypnosis is proven. I don't know much about hypnosis, but I just wanted to flag it because I've just written it down. And also the ability to really tune in properly, which is the psychic element to the psionics element to consciousness, and how that links in here somewhere. I'm not sure. These are very, very deep rabbit holes, though.
Yeah, they're big, fairly advanced subjects, and you really have to discuss a fair few other points before you can really have a good conscious discussion about that.
Make our way to that. I met with someone recently, actually two people, two very different examples. One, super healthy, unbelievably disciplined, has his life in order in a lot of ways, but he's unhappy. Seemingly has everything.
He's unhappy because he has everything and he's relaxed. Yeah.
Well, another person is very successful financially, lots of things that are outrageous, unhappy, and doing things to himself that are harming. I believe harming overall. And his words to me were, I'm pretty sure I'm going to blow this all up.
Yep.
I need to do something. But on the surface, you look at it and you look at the success he's had and you think, wow, tick, 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 tick. You know what I mean? But at the subconscious level, the software, there's something not right. He's not happy. These chasing things won't make you happy. And ultimately, you can't run from yourself.
No.
So if there's something in the deep buried in the subconscious, it ultimately will manifest.
Yes,
Because there's only a certain amount of time you can run.
Toxic waste. Yeah. So he's buried a heap of toxic stuff down in the dungeon, and very successfully put his boot on it and said, "You don't exist."
And kept
Because
working.
I need to concentrate. Yeah, I need to concentrate on this. I need to focus on that. I need drive and focus and blah blah blah. And I can't be thinking about that stuff which makes me feel uncomfortable. Hence, you bury it, and he's done it very well. But now that he's getting to the point where he's actually starting to relax a little bit, that he's starting to notice that all the cupboards are glowing green because the radioactivity's seeped through, and this will just keep building. And people will start drinking, and they start hiding from it. They start smoking heaps of pot, anything to disassociate from this thing and stop the monster from getting through.
Yeah. And got to embrace the monster somehow.
You do, and this is where the monster is just the unfinished experience. And if we allow ourselves to sit there, and there's no healing without feeling. You have to feel. You have to feel it. But the problem is, and the problem here is that what he's done over the years is he's built what in psychological terms they call constellations, right? So it's little trauma stacked on top of little trauma stacked on top of little trauma.
It's a trauma stack.
And it's a trauma stack, and a lot of them aren't the same, right? So here's the thing: you mentioned hypnotherapy before, so let's send him to a hypnotherapist. So the hypnotherapist is like, right, what do you want to achieve? Well, I'm feeling unhappy. Okay. Let's talk about your childhood, blah, blah, blah. So what the hypnotherapist is looking for is a trauma, right? And so, but he doesn't know what it is. He can't point to one thing and say, this is the thing that's wrong. I need to fix this thing. So he can't tell that to the hypnotherapist. The hypnotherapist can't take you to that point and rewire that software, right? That's the problem with it is, now let's take a different person on their way to work. Child runs in front of them, not their fault. And they hit a child in their car and kill the child. Horrendous. And he can't get past it. He can't get past this. He goes to a hypnotherapist, and the hypnotherapist says, what's the problem? He goes, well, it all started when I ran over this child. Right. Let's put you into a hypnotic state, an altered conscious state, take you back to that moment. Now let's rationalize that moment. Let's finish that experience. It wasn't your fault. That child came out of nowhere. Could have happened to anybody, blah, 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 the whole story. And we finish that experience. We rewrite that program. Now you can come out of that with an opportunity to run the new software, to go, yep, that was really horrible, but it was completely out of my control. And I can spend the rest of my life feeling sad about it, but it's not going to change anything. So the best thing I can do is get on with my life, So now you can do something, but he still has both of those pieces of software in the default mode network. He has to continuously choose every day, I'm going to run the new software, and that is a feeling that is almost always linked to a feeling. And this is how the mind hacking takes place. And psilocybin does exactly the same thing. You come to a point in your microdosing experience or your journey experience where you go, oh, I understand why I'm like that now. And there's an emotion that'll be attached to that. Oh, got it. Now, later on in life, when you're trying to continuously to choose to run that new software, it's the emotion that can trigger the new software. The same as I could trigger some of your old software by pushing an emotional button on you, or vice versa, right? Yep. It naturally will trigger the old response. But you can deliberately trigger the new response by deliberately feeling the emotion associated with it. So hypnosis does work, but you've got to know what you're going after. The problem with most of us is we haven't got a friggin' clue. It's a giant, I call it, like I explain to people, like playing that pickup sticks game. It's a giant mess of all of these triggers and traumas and stuff like that, all stacked on top of each other. And we go, oh, it's this one. It's like, no, that's just the one you're feeling. Underneath that is a whole heap of others. And you've got to find your way right the way down to the bottom. And that's the one you've got to pull. You've got to solve that one. And then the rest of them will fall like dominoes.
Yeah, that's right. Because the trauma stacks. That trauma creates a related trauma, and then it cascades, and you have a whole series of different related events.
So I can give you a really good example of that. I had a young bloke as a client who came to me, wit's end. He was in his mid-30s, good-looking young bloke, very professional job. I won't say the job. Very professional job, but related to trauma, of course. And hadn't been able to have relationships. Relationships were just disasters every single time. He goes, and I've been on antidepressants since he was 18 years old. I'm over it, Brian. Something's got to change, mate. I've got to change something. And I agree. I said, yep, you're right. Something does have to change. So he went through the microdosing program. And as he was going through the microdosing program, he was starting to uncover all of these traumas. And he's like, dude, there's so much stuff here. I said, well, just write it down. He goes, yeah, but how do I fix it? I said, you don't fix it. The you that I'm speaking to doesn't fix this. All you have to do is feel it, recognize it, acknowledge it. That's it. And he goes, how do I acknowledge it? I said, write it down. So after 3 months of that, he said to me, I definitely need to do a journey. I said, why? He said, because I am this close to getting what I want, i.e., ridding myself of all this toxic trauma, but I just can't get over the line. I said, yeah, that's perfect. That is the reason to have a journey. I said, perfect. And so he rocked up on the morning of the journey, with his little bag of mushrooms that he brought with him and all the rest of it. And he's like, okay, but how do I need to work out how I'm going to fix all this trauma? I said, dude, you don't fix it. I said, give me the list. He had 3 fool's cap pieces of paper with all these traumas written on them. 3 full cap, probably 200 separate traumas that he had identified, right? And I said, you've done all the work you need to do.
A body of work.
A whole heap of it. And he goes, but what am I going, I can't clean all this in one go, blah, blah. I said, no. I said, you're not going to clean any of it, mate. You need to let go of the concept, surrender, that you are going to fix this, because you are not going to fix this. You are going to step into the passenger seat and you are going to let somebody who's about 1,000,000 times more powerful than you fix this, your subconscious self, your higher self, whatever name you want to put to it. He goes, yeah, I don't get it. I said, you don't have to get it. Just relax. I said, there is nothing more that you can do. What we're going to do is you're going to drink the mushrooms, and you're just going to lay back on the couch and listen to the music. That's it. That's the only thing you need to do today. So he went into his journey, and within a couple of minutes, I could see that he was in a fairly agitated state, which is fairly normal. And then all of a sudden, he just calmed right down. And at the end of the journey, when we were integrating, I asked him to take me back to the very beginning. What was the first thing that, when did you realize that, okay, this was going to work? Because one of the things that the ego says is, oh yeah, mushrooms will work on everybody else, but they're not going to work on me. I've drunk the stuff, but it's not going to work. And so you lay there going, see, nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden you realize, holy shit, something is happening. And he said, well, the first thing I started seeing was, these psychedelic patterns and, what we call sacred geometry. And I believe that is actually something that is actually physically happening in the brain, where the brain is actually making new neural connections. And hence you see those spreading patterns that you see. That's my theory. But anyway, this guy, and I said to him, explain what happened. He goes, oh, it's very weird. I said, dude, I've sat for hundreds of mushroom journeys for people. Nothing you say is going to be weird. Trust me. And he goes, well, he said, I was on this alien spaceship. I said, okay, that's interesting. He goes, you reckon I was on an alien spaceship? I'm like, dude, I've had enough mushrooms to know that I have no idea. I said, if you say you were on an alien spaceship, let's just run with that. And he goes, okay. He said, and I was absolutely petrified because I was in the presence of this being, and if they found me, they're just going to squash me like a cockroach because I didn't deserve to be there. I said, okay. And then we talked about the emotions of what he was feeling, insignificance, no control. I can't do anything here. I'm helpless, which is all very familiar with the kind of state that he was been living his life in. I said, okay, what happened next? And he goes, well, then he said, then it changed. He said, because I started to feel really grateful. I said, okay, what changed? He said, because I realized that this being in this ship knew that I was there and it was allowing me to be there. And he said, I felt so grateful that it wasn't just going to squash me like a cockroach because it was so powerful. And I said, well, okay, good. And we talked about that. And we talked about what the emotions were and all the rest of that. And I said, okay, and what happened next? And he said, then the shit really hit the fan. I said, well, what happened? He said, I realized that I was that being, that the being was me. And he said, the moment I had that realization, I saw in my head every single one of those traumas that I wrote down, and I just started laughing because they were all so ridiculously insignificant and pointless, because here I am, this massively powerful being, and all this stuff is just a friggin' joke. And he said, like that, it was gone. And I said to him, wow. He goes, yeah. He said, that was in the first bloody 15 minutes of my journey. I said, what did you do for the rest of the journey? He said, I was just floating around in space and seeing beautiful colors and just feeling really awesome. I said, okay. But there's another point that came up, which is very important. As he started coming out of the journey, I noticed that he started to get agitated again. And so I reminded him of this. He goes, yeah. He said, as I started to come out of the journey and my default mode network starts to kick back in, the ego starts to build back its power. The ego said to me, you can't heal all that stuff in one go like that. You can't do that. And he said, I had to go to war with my ego saying, no, I did do that. I have done that. I feel better now and I'm sticking to it. You can't take this away from me. Because the ego wants to go back to the status quo. It wants to go back to what it was, because that's where it feels comfortable. The new version of him, which didn't have all these fears and all these hang-ups and all these issues, the ego doesn't know what that new version is, right? It's new. The old version has literally died, and there's a new version of him now. And we don't know what this guy does. How does this guy act? What does he do? How does he respond under certain circumstances? We don't know, because he's a new version of himself. And the ego doesn't like that. His ego is frightened by that. So he had this battle with himself to stay in that. And he did. He did it successfully, because I said to remember all that time you spent floating around feeling completely invincible and powerful and totally, present in your experience. I said, remember that emotion. And every time you start feeling like you're losing control again, remember that emotion, which triggers the new neural pathway in his brain. And he went back. And he has gone on. He's only ever had the one experience, the one journey, and he has gone on to change his entire life. He's now in a very, very stable relationship, changed his job, has a much more stable relationship with his family, went through a whole heap of, trauma with them, where a lot of them got really sick, and he went down and looked after them, totally off his antidepressants, never went back to them, changed his whole life for that one, out of that one moment. So that's an example of changing the software at a very, very, very deep level. Now, when we do hypnosis, for example, we can pick that one little file and we can change the script, right? But when you've got file stacked on top of file, stacked on top of file, it gets a lot harder to change the script.
Yes.
Unless you get at the very core, the very core programming stage where you go, you know what? I don't want to be the old version of me anymore. I'm going to be this guy. And he came face to face with a much more powerful version of himself, and he adopted it.
Yes. Intention.
Intention. So he had that intention going in. The conscious mind is like, this is impossible, right? But the conscious mind's not in charge. The subconscious mind is, and nothing is impossible for the subconscious mind. Nothing.
No. It's that's a nice link into the next episode.
Yeah.
Isn't it? A nice link into the next episode.
Look at us. We're killing it.
Yes. And that's, look, it's a magical world. And it's good to hear different perspectives and different experiences, and everyone's different. Everyone's unique, and you would have seen every possible scenario play out with the coaching that you've been doing, which I think is very important work. Brian, what you're doing is very, very important work.
The key thing that I've understood after all this stuff that we've watched take place, and psychiatrists would kill to have seen the things that I've seen, is that healing is personal. There is no template, right? Everybody has a completely different experience. Now, I can sit down and explain all this to you, and I can even draw you pictures on a whiteboard and put you in front of a nice slide presentation about how to do this, right? So this is how you do it, Trent. At the end of the day, it means nothing to you. It's you that has to do it.
Yes.
So it has to be meaningful to you. You can't sell a fridge to an Eskimo, right? He's actually got to come to you and ask for a fridge. That's the only way you're going to give him one, right?
Can't sell ice to an Eskimo. Good man. Wow, that's nearly 2 hours.
Wow.
I hope have we covered off everything that you wanted to get in the running sheet?
Yeah, look, there's more information in there about, some of the, the real benefits of microdosing. But I mean, look, well, actually, one of the things that we should say before I go is when not to microdose. So this is important. So when you're taking other other chemicals, for example, when is a good time to not take it, and what substances should you not microdose with? So there's an awesome website, and I will send you the links to the website and also the links to those apps as well. So maybe put that in your podcast.
Put those in the notes.
On the website. Yep. But there's an entire website dedicated to the substances that we know don't interfere or interact with mushrooms, right? Because there's lots of stuff out there. But there are two things in particular that we know do have interference. One of them is lithium, if you're taking lithium. And that is, it's only a mild thing. It caused serotonin syndrome, which is extremely uncomfortable and can lead to hospitalization in a couple of people.
Avoid lithium.
Yeah.
Yep. Anything else?
Avoid lithium, and that might not be a massive issue. It's just occurred in a couple of people, so it's not really big. The other one is tramadol. Tramadol is a painkiller. Do not take tramadol under any circumstances. It's still being handed out by doctors, but it's almost guaranteed to cause depression. And if you take tramadol and psilocybin together, that's a really bad combination.
That just comes back to getting the right advice, doing the research. There's lots of different access points for information.
So that website, for example, microdosingpsychedelics.com, it has the current list, which is being updated on a daily basis of everything that you can and can't do.
We'll pop that in the show notes.
Yes.
As well as we've got a really good running sheet. I might pop that in the show notes as well. So it's a good resource there as well. So, okay, I think there's probably a bit more here. I think we've covered off on the microdosing. There's a lot more to that. We want to get into the hero's journey next. And I think that following that, we're going to talk about ego. So we've got some.
Well, then we can get into the nitty gritty of the bigger stuff, which is very much rabbit hole-y, and that's not going to help somebody who's looking to try and solve their traumas now.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But
It's going to sound
again. Yeah. Microdosing for me has been game changing.
Yeah.
In particular, creativity.
Yep.
And finding connection through meditation and unlocking and trying to understand self and connection to self. So for me personally, hugely beneficial. Helped me stop. I was not an alcoholic, but I was drinking way too much. Just to relax myself.
Yeah.
So I haven't been drinking since I haven't touched a drop since microdosing, and that is 4 months. And I don't want to. You know what I mean?
No.
Like I've sort of rewired that part of my subconscious to say, you know what, ultimately it's a depressant. It does relax you, but it was working against you. And I think that's for me, speaking from experience. So I really enjoyed our chat again, Brian. I love spending time with you, learning from you.
I'd like to leave on just one point, and it's about microdosing. Albert Hofmann is a very famous Swiss pharmacist and researcher who was basically being funded by the CIA.
the grandfather, isn't he? Considered the grandfather of psychedelics.
You would consider him the grandfather of microdosing, exactly.
Microdosing,
And he discovered LSD, which is a derivative of the ergot fungus, which is the same stuff that the Catholic Church used in their sacramental wine. It's the same stuff that the Greeks used and stuff like that. He discovered LSD by accident back in 1938. Yeah.
Yes.
But he lived until he was 102 years old. But even when he was when he was 100 years old, he was still giving very long technical lectures on organic chemistry and stuff like that at age 100. And for the last 20 years of his life, he microdosed. You know,
there you go.
So even at 100, he was still like bulletproof. I'm not sure I want to live till I'm 100, but you know, it's
impressive
because those parts of his brain just did not, you know, did not disintegrate.
It was creating them continually.
And we now know that the neurofunctions of the brain can be regenerated. We now know that. We always thought that it just gradually died off over time, but we now know that you can regenerate them. You know, science is very quickly catching up, but you know, science was stalled for, you know, decades because it was taken away.
Yes, now it's on the comeback trail.
Well, yeah, very fast.
Very big movement coming, and we're riding the wave of that, which is very exciting for humans in general, I think. So it's getting the word out there, which we've done. Thanks again, Brian, and look forward to the next installment.
Awesome, mate. Talk to you next time.
This is Not for the Average with Trent Leishon.